peace negotiations for Ukraine and Russia have never been closer. But at the same time, they've never been a bigger dumpster fire. Just how bad are things getting? And why is the responsibility for this falling, it seems, on the vice president? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to talk about that, plus some classified information available on a public government website. Just why is the U.S. government suddenly leaking like a sieve? Let's get into it. Okay. So this is, I think, the number one story here, and you have to put this in context. So J.D. Vance was at the Munich Security Conference, which is, well, a conference about European security issues. And his speech, though, he said the real danger isn't Russia or Islamic terrorism, but actually it was European policies and laws around free speech, right? Now, he points out that in Romania, a election was simply canceled because an unpopular candidate appeared to have won. You also, of course, had he pointed out instances in which free speech was restricted by European governments. And this was not well received by the Europeans, right? When you look over at European outlets, they really don't pull any punches. J.D. Vance stuns Munich conference's blistering attack on Europe's leaders, calling them a threat from within, right? And this is a pretty dire allegation to throw around. Now, I'm not going to even weigh in on the merits and drawbacks of Vice President Vance's statements. And I agree that Europe just has a different tradition around some of these principles like free speech, right? America is considered sort of so committed to free speech that it's a little unhinged, right? Other European countries are like, whoa, you let people say that? And that's part of what makes America great. I think that's true. But I'm not somebody who sits there and goes, well, if it's great in America, it must be great in all these other countries too. And the point is not whether or not they're right or wrong. The point is that this was not the time to bring it up, right? This is like bringing up somebody's like most embarrassing moment at their college graduation, right? You're just like, dude, can you not let them have a good time? Or even worse, this is like a car salesman who is close to getting to the end of the sale and then suddenly begins making fun of the customer's clothes. Dudes, that's a great way to lose a sale in a heartbeat. And this is the problem because it's the Munich Security Conference. And you might recall that literally like 72 hours ago, the vice president was saying that, hey, the peace deal with Ukraine and Russia, it's going to not involve U.S. troops. It's going to involve European troops. So imagine, right? You're the vice president. You go out and you say, listen, U.S. troops not going to be on the contact line between Russia and Ukraine. Not happening. We're the largest military in the world. We've been bankrolling this, but we won't put our troops in the way of Russia, right? That seems, even if that's privately the policy, it's a little weird to do that because that would have been a really good negotiating tactic when you sit down with Putin, right? To say, hey, Putin, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we're going to have 7 brigades of the U.S. military sitting at the contact line. That would scare Vladimir Putin, right? So why would you just give that up? Even if privately you know you're never really going to put all those troops there. But nonetheless, right, maybe that is simply a policy that they've wanted to get out. They want to try to scale negotiations down. Okay, sure, right? That's possible. The problem is you may know that he didn't say U.S. troops won't do it. He also said European troops will do it. So that's a pretty big favor to say, hey, Europeans, the United States, we may not have told you this, but we actually just committed you to maintaining a huge peacekeeping force, which Zelensky has numbered at around 1.5 million. So for context, that's basically every European service member will now be deployed on the contact line of Ukraine if the U.S. gets its way. There's a problem. There's a deeper problem. Is that now, literally 72 hours later, J.D. Vance tells them that, hey, by the way, guys, you're not real democracies, and you're the greatest threat to your own country. Even if you believe that, right? Sort of like, I don't know, Trump and Putin, right? We go, hey, we don't like Putin. He's not a great guy. But boy, do you think Trump brought it up in the call with him? Do you think he said, your elections are fraudulent bullshit? You're a dictator. You kidnap our citizens and throw them in prison on trumped up charges, right? You commit war crimes blatantly, right? And Trump knows he didn't bring this up because it's not going to serve his objectives. So why on fucking earth is JD Vance going to sit there and give Europe a lecture on why don't they have European or US style freedom of speech protections? And again, I point this out because the United States has limits, a lot of limits on their own free speech. You don't have total free speech in the United States, right? Again, commercial speech. You can't sit there and go, buy my fucking cryptocurrency. I guarantee you 20% returns. That's illegal speech. There is no cryptocurrency. Don't do that, right? You can't, for example, say, oh, by the way, this piece of paper I made is as good as US dollars. Can't say stuff like that. You can't even say fighting words, right? Right? Where you just simply say words that are so antagonizing, they'll incite an immediate breach of the peace by provoking a fight, right? You can't threaten the president of the United States with physical violence. And there's so many other things. You can't, as an employer, you get to regulate what your employees say, right? You can't have your employees saying, yeah, I'll give you that Rolex for free, dog. I don't care, right? Pornography, obscenity, right? News. Teachers can't say stuff. Government subsidizing a speaker. We have a ton of regulations around free speech, and every country does it differently. That doesn't mean you're not a democracy. And again, I'm not going to weigh in on his specific concerns. But again, I point out that democracies, in general, vest state power with the people or general population of a state. That's it. That's it, right? Power in Russia is vested in Vladimir Putin and, to a lesser extent, his key oligarchs in his government and that control large state-backed industries. So that is not the general population. And that looks different in every country. It's going to have a little bit of a different flavor, right? In the US, we say, listen, felons, if you commit a certain level of crime in your country or in our country, you lose your right to participate in democracy because you've demonstrated that you don't really want to be an upstanding member of society. And that doesn't mean we're not a democracy, just means that every democracy does it a little differently. And the problem is when you sit there and go, Europeans, by the way, we need you to do this huge favor for us, and also fuck yourselves. That's what JD Vance is out here doing. And, this is what happens when you look, and this is something the Trump administration has been honest. They say, listen, we view a lot of people who are policymakers or in policy positions as being sort of agents of the evil deep state. And we fired all of them. Guys, this is exactly what happens when policy people don't exist. Because policy people, their job is to do exactly what we're seeing not happen now. Get together, weigh in all the different factors, all the different pushes and pulls and stretches and this and that and all the considerations and say, okay, given all the things we want that are important to us, what do we say we want to do? What does achieving our goals look like, right? A good policy person or policy group is going to be like Google Maps. They're going to say, listen, you want to get to your destination, whether that's a Ukraine peace deal or you want to get to your local Starbucks. And good policy people are going to say, okay, do you want to pay tolls? Yes or no? You go, I don't care about tolls. Okay, so where are the roads closed? Where's there going to be high traffic? Where is it going to be, right? Where do you live? Where are we currently? And do we need to stop and pick anybody else up on the way? So Google Maps takes all that data and spits it out and it goes, okay, here's the best route for you. Here's the way you want to do it. And so what you see instead is every person is taking different routes. Some of them are driving in circles, as we just saw with JD Vance, where he takes a step towards getting the Europeans to say, hey, we want you to do this. And then he takes 2 steps backwards. He's driving in circles around the cul-de-sac, guys, right? Then you have Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg says, actually, Europe, you're not even going to be at the negotiating table on Ukraine, right? And that's okay. That's not wrong if that's your policy objective, to limit the number of people at the table. He says European interests would still be taken into account. It's okay. That's fine if that's your policy. But wait, why is Keith Kellogg saying that when in fact, apparently Keith Kellogg isn't going to be at the table either? Trump said, quote, I have asked Secretary of State Mark Rubio, Director of the CIA John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Ambassador Special Envoy Steve Witkoff not to be confused with the Ukraine Special Envoy Keith Kellogg to lead negotiations, right? Again, pointing out Keith Kellogg, right, is the Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, who's currently in Kiev trying to get the negotiations to happen. This is insanity. So the Europeans are go, can we even, is it Keith Kellogg? Is he just talking out his ass? He doesn't appear to even be at the table either. And so this is all part of a policy disaster that's shaping up for Ukraine. Now, it may not be a policy disaster. And as I've pointed out on this channel repeatedly, the Europeans they continue to labor under the delusion that they have for 80 fucking years, which is that NATO means the US and friends, right? And that being in the NATO alliance means that all you have to spend on your military is solely enough just to hold off whoever's invading you long enough for the Americans to get there because the Americans will do the fighting. And at some point, you have to sit there and go, listen, we, the Europeans, if we value something, we have an economy and a population large enough to rival the United States, but we instead choose to neuter ourselves, right? We choose to not bare our fangs, have our claws. The only European country that spends enough to actually have a say in its defensive or offensive or military outcomes, unfortunately, is Russia, and to a lesser extent, the Baltic states. But the Baltic states do not represent those large portions of the European economic and population centers, right? Those are Germany, France, the UK, right? And to a lesser extent, like Italy. And they simply do not have the initiative, do not have the capacity, and they haven't built the capacity over the last 3 years to make these choices on their own. They do not have the ability to produce their own weapons. They do not have the ability to produce their own gear. They do not have armies large enough to negotiate. And so that's the problem. They're ultimately looking around and saying, damn, we trusted the U.S. to take the lead on all this because they are the only ones with a large military. And now they go, oh shit, they're doing things. They are driving in circles on Google Maps, right? And they say, shit, that sucks because the U.S., they were a ride to the coffee shop and they're fucking going crazy. Something's wrong with their Google Maps. They don't know where they're going. And so the Europeans have to go, shit. For 80 years, we've been able to get away without really having a car. Like we had a bike and we had like a go-kart, right? We could kind of get around a little bit, but we would need a hand to go anywhere meaningful. Now, again, they've had 3 years that I've been saying on this channel that the Europeans need to ramp up. They need to buy a car. It's like your unemployed loser friend. You go, listen, dude, I can't haul you around forever, right? I can't give you rides for the rest of your life. And at some point, after 3 years of saying that, you go, listen, I traded my car for a motorcycle, dude. There's no ride. The ride is gone. And the Europeans are like, what? What do you mean? How am I going to get to work? And they go, I don't know. You're a grown man. You're a grown country. You're a sovereign nation. Or rather, you're a group of sovereign nations. Figure it out. So on one hand, I'm mad at the United States for its just lack of policy, right? Lack of decision. And again, I was somebody who's like, I think the Trump administration has immense potential because he is so willing to consider options and directions that no one else is, that he can actually in some ways inspire more good faith negotiating because like things that Biden would never do, Trump might actually do, right? But the trade-off is that instead what we appear to have gotten is just a lack of coherent policy, and no one seems to understand what's going on. And again, when the Europeans and the Americans have way different concepts, how do you negotiate, right? It's really embarrassing. Again, it's like sitting down and you're at a car dealer and it's you and your spouse and you're talking to the car dealer and you're like, okay, listen, here's where I think we're at. Oh man, that's too expensive. We need the upgraded model, blah, blah, blah. And then your wife goes, no, I want the nicer model. I don't care what it costs. And you go and you're like, yo, we're trying to negotiate here. We got to keep a united front. You can't fight with me while we're in front of the fucking car salesman, right? This is fundamental negotiation 101, because now the car salesman goes, great. I am going to lean more heavily on the spouse because she wants to spend more. And he goes, well, tell me about what you like about that buyer model. Well, we could finance it. We could your payments would only increase $25 a month. And suddenly she goes, yeah, only $25 a month. Now look, the negotiation has switched. Now it's my spouse and the car salesman negotiating against me. And that's the fear. It's triangulation. If a used car salesman can do it, I promise you, Vladimir Putin can do it. And he does. This is part of his goal. And so this is sort of the fear that we all have. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some other problems around the U.S.'s negotiation policy and some of the more faults. But first, I want to mention that, again, I'm lucky because sometimes the free speech is the one you build for yourself. And that's what I've done because I don't take money from governments. I don't take money from major media outlets, right? I take money occasionally from sponsors about once or twice a month. And they're always disclosed, and they're always like data protection sponsors, right? Because I believe in them, and they never ask me to do anything for my content. But that's not an accident. It's because I have you guys backing me up, right? I don't need to worry about whether YouTube's going to monetize my videos or not, or whether sponsors are going to, if I'm going to get sponsors or not, or anything, because you guys have my back, because I'm crowdfunded 100%. And not trying to make it worth your while. Combat Vet News is the site, functions like Patreon, series of tiers. If you want to support me, right, what do I try to do for you? I get you every Tuesday and Thursday uncensored combat footage from the front lines. A lot of it gets texted to me, sent to me via Signal from units that are on the front lines. They send me non-public stuff, right? It's cleared for release. I'm not a jerk, but it's raw. I mean, it is raw footage, dude. I got a message from one of the guys recently. It said, "From Ukraine with love," and it was video of them bombing a Russian and lighting him on fire. So if you have that kind of unhinged energy, you don't have to. You can support me and not look at the videos. But if you want that kind of stuff, you want to become a member. CombatVetNews.com, or the link's right there in the description. Okay. Boy. Now, when you say stuff like this, that it's a European's job, and then you go to the Ukrainians and you say, give us your mineral rights. But it's not even the mineral rights. Zelensky says, actually, the document says we're going to transfer 50% of Ukrainian mineral resources to the U.S. This is way more. First off, it's not clear that Zelensky has the right to transfer minerals from his country any more than President Trump has the right to go to your house and go, U.S. government owns this now. There's oil under here. Get out of your house. And you go, no, that's my property, dude. Right? And even if the president says, imagine if Biden and was to show up outside somebody's ranch and go, hey, we're building windmills here, guy. Get out. They go, no, dude, I don't care. This is my property. It's not the government's property. You can buy it from me if you want. So right there, Zelensky may be like, you physically can't. I physically can't. I'm the president. I'm not God. I can't sign away someone else's minerals, right? Now, they could sit there. Then, again, oftentimes when these deals are done, they're mineral rights. So, for example, they may say, hey, we'll give the U.S. company a license to operate a mine. They'll still have to pay for it. They'll still have to do, sell the things at market rate. But we're willing to grant you that. Or we'll say, hey, we'll sell exclusively. I'll push for a law that says, hey, minerals are restricted. They can only be sold to the United States. That's generally how these deals go. And I think that's what, again, I strongly suspect that's what Zelensky thought they were negotiating. They were negotiating like mineral rights or access. And I think what he got was a document that says, no, we're literally like the minerals are a currency for weapons. You're buying weapons with minerals. And Zelensky was like, dude, I can't. Like, this would be so fucking illegal for me to do this. And he's probably like, this is also absurd because you're out there giving speeches about how you want to fuck us. So, like, you can't sit there and go, hey, Russia's going to keep all its territory, we think. Hey, do you want to sell your minerals for weapons to defend yourselves? And he goes, no, you just said you want me to give Russia everything. Do you want the minerals? Why would I count on aid, because he might go, listen, Trump, you could sign this deal till the cows come home, but you don't have the authority. You need Congress to pass an aid bill. And unless you can do that, right, there's no guarantee. We might sell you our our minerals, and you might not give us anything, especially when I know you're having phone calls with Vladimir Putin where you've said you want to totally sell us out, right? Because that's how it looks from Ukraine's perspective, to say, Russia's going to just take everything they've occupied. So, like, why would you do a deal with someone who's actively trying to, from your perspective, sell you out? So you see how, again, this is a total fucking disaster, right? An absolute crazy, right? He supports a strategic partnership with the United States in rare earth mining, part of an agreement of economic support and security guarantees, right? That's what Zelensky thought he was negotiating. And then the United States handed him a piece of paper that said, no, the U.S. has the right to 50% of Ukraine's future mineral reserves. Just unhinged shit. Again, Zelensky's out here in his speech at Munich, which everyone has apparently rewritten their speeches. He said, listen, NATO membership, still our core demand. It is the only deterrent against Russian aggression in the future. And he said, listen, Europe, yo, dudes, we're in this. We're stuck in this. The United States cannot do this, right? During his speech, Zelensky warned that Russia is expanding its army to attack Europe. This is true. He said North Korean troops are aiding Russia, and European was getting ready, even as Pyongyang's troops are getting better and better, right? And again, as we've pointed out, what Pyongyang's troops learn, they are going to be transferring that knowledge, those tactics, that structure to North Koreans, right? The North Korean military, who will then feel empowered to go toe-to-toe with the South Koreans, right? Because if you think the United States has bailed on Europe, do you think we're going to go toe-to-toe, blow for blow with the South Koreans? Probably not, guys, right? And do you think then that the U.S. is also going to go toe-to-toe with China over Taiwan? Because China's also going to learn these tactics. So all of these guys are going to feel like they're going to smell blood in the water, is the fear. And I think that's a valid fear. Again, it's something that we've talked about. It's the number one case for eliminating Russian aggression into Ukraine, right? To continue to perpetuate, it doesn't have to be a myth, but it feels more like a myth now, that the European Western alliance, right, and democracies are so economically powerful, so militarily powerful, that they cannot be opposed. You cannot annex territory that they don't want you to. And that is now, all of these countries are learning, is not the case, right? And Zelensky asks, what about your armies? Are they ready? No, they're not, right? He went on to rally for a self-sufficient Europe to fend off Russian aggression. Europe needs a single voice, not a dozen different ones. And there's a need to defend Europe through unity, right? So I think this is again, an illustration that perhaps a long overdue move towards a common European security architecture is important and necessary. But again, it's going to be really fucking hard today to negotiate today between Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. Now, I want to point out that my issue with the lack of policy, the lack of thinking through things, is not just Ukraine based, right? And there's all kinds of ways where the thing to understand is that at the end of the day, the difference in everyone's lives between Twitter existing and something like Twitter vanishing from existence, blinking out in a heartbeat, is basically nothing. Almost no one's life is going to be markedly worse. You will be pissed about it. The Twitter influencers will be mad. And then they will download Blue Sky, they will download Threads, and they will move on with their lives. And that is why in the private sector, move fast and break things, right? Make big cuts, dramatically change a company. You can just boom, 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 do it, right? Because you can always fix it, right? Things are often fixable. It's rare that you actually nuke a company so bad, restructure a company so bad that it fundamentally reshapes existence, right? But that is not how government works. Governments do some pretty important shit, and you can't fuck it up. And so when I see some of these stories, people are like, well, why are you so down on Elon Musk? He wants what's best for the government. And I broadly agree with his objectives, right? The government spends too much money. We swipe the credit card on 50% of our spending every single year, right? And you can't do that. You can't do it in your house. You can't do it when you're the US government. We've gotten away with it for a long time because our credit card rates are low, but they're not going to stay low for long. But you have to think things through, and they're not. For example, the Trump administration, but really this is Elon Musk Doge because he's the only one firing people, apparently, fired 300 staffers Thursday night at the National Nuclear Security Administration. Now, again, you go, oh, that sounds pretty important. Nuclear security is pretty important, but yeah. And that's so important. It's the agency tasked with managing the nation's nuclear stockpile, right? They did not realize that the US's nuclear weapons, the things that we use to deter China and Russia from using them, right? They were just laid off because they were in the Department of Energy. Again, this is something that they very quickly realized. They said less than 50 people were dismissed from the NNSA. Dismissed staffers had primarily administrative and clerical roles. But it's tough to know, right? Because the White House says it was less than 50 people, but the agency themselves said, no, it was like 300 dudes. You fired like 300 people. And that's a lot of people when it comes to a small agency whose job is to secure our nuclear weapons, guys. Again, the US's charity wing, USAID, again, there's some cuts that do some good work. They do some work that I think is of little value. And it's okay to audit them and to line item out some stuff. But again, you can't do it. You have to think it through. Because look, what if you were Russia? And what if you were said, I'm tired of the US. I'm tired of their bullying. I'm tired of their bullshit. And you said, oh, by the way, I know that the people responsible for maintaining the nuclear stockpile, I know they all just got fired. What would you do? Would that be maybe a good time to try to take Taiwan? Maybe even to try to take other countries that are protected by the US nuclear umbrella. Maybe you would sit there and go, if you're Putin, you say, well, listen, if I think that the US's nuclear arsenal is been gutted, maybe now's the time to nuke Kiev. Because I don't think the US will be ready to respond. Right? And so this is why you cannot play these fuck games. You cannot play these stupid games. A source told CNN, and again, it's CNN, but take the quotes. Individuals are fired because no one has taken any time to understand what we do and the importance of our work to our nation's security, right? Members of Congress said, hey, listen, the NNSA is it's an important part of the DOE, right? Senators visited the Secretary of Energy and said, dude, don't cut the people who fucking regulate our nukes. You're going to turn this country into a fucking ash pile. And again, it appears DOE didn't really realize NNSA oversees our nuclear weapons stockpile. The problem, again, is not to say maybe there's roles that it can be leaned out. Maybe it's true. But they didn't realize they existed. And so here's the problem. What other key components, key aspects of America's security apparatus are getting gutted because nobody fucking knows what they do? That's the problem. You can't fuck it up and go, we'll add them back in later if they're necessary. You can't. There's zero fail. You cannot undo a nuclear war. You can't just oopsie it. It's not like fucking building a fucking app for delivering shoes or whatever. Okay? If your app doesn't deliver the fucking shoes, you just fix it and you refund your customers and you move on. You go, that cost us a lot of money. That was stupid, right? If your country gets turned into a fucking fallout wasteland, you can't come back from that. And so this is the kind of recklessness, the cavalier attitude that, again, I don't blame anybody but Elon Musk. I blame a little bit the White House because they're permitting him to do it and they don't appear to be picking up the phone and being like, stop this shit. But apparently he's also posted classified information on his website. He posted on doge.gov, right? That gives you the ability to trace your tax dollars through the bureaucracy, which is, again, something that you could always do through usaspending.com or through literally the dozens of public policy. This Congressional Budget Office also does this. Again, the fact that they have boring names and not silly meme names makes you think, well, it's Doge. Cool. I actually am into this. I'm into the idea that more people should actually trace their tax dollars through the bureaucracy. That's cool. The problem is they put classified information in there about the National Reconnaissance Office because they didn't understand what it did. They didn't realize the National Reconnaissance Office sounds fucking generic. It's not. They build the fucking intelligence satellites that let us read fucking license plates in China. Yeah. They told them the budget and head count. Here's the thing. If you know the budget and you know the average salary of a government employee, then you can infer the budget that remains for operations. And if you know your operations are launching intelligence satellites, all you have to do is ballpark the cost of a satellite launch, which is publicly available because not every launch is classified. And you can figure out how many satellites approximately the US has launched in any given year. And why is that bad? Well, if you are Russia or you are China, you are going to want to know what the US can and cannot see about your world. And that is why that information is classified. Again, or if you're China and you're like, I want to knock out US satellites. Or you're China and we try to track every US satellite and we thought we got them all, but we know that there are 10 now that the US launched and we can't find them. So we need to look back and find more of them. They're out there. They're spying on us or terrorists or the Russians or Ukrainians or somebody. We have to find them. Do you see how this is a problem? And the fact is, again, I'm not mad about leaning out government. I'm mad that you don't give a shit, that nobody gives a fuck about doing things the right way. Everybody pretends like it's a fucking shoe delivery business or that it's some fucking dog shit AI software startup where you can just fuck it up and just use investor money to rebuild it. You can't. You can't. Once China knows exactly how many satellites you have, you can't, they're never going to unknow it. Like, you don't understand the competitiveness. You don't understand that we live in a world where the US free market, you don't understand. It's a protected bubble that has been built. It's like football players believing that because they're good at football, they'd also be great generals, right? They go, well, I can win a war because I'm good at football. No, dude, you're good at football because it's played in a big arena on a level playing field governed by a host of strict rules and an incredibly robust set of referees. Do not think that your skill at football means that you can go to Ukraine and fucking kill 1,000 Russians. It doesn't mean that, because the real world outside of the little nice America bubble is it is an ungoverned, chaotic world. It is nature, right? It is dog eat dog, right? If you are weak, right? If China could press a button to delete the United States and every citizen in it, it would very likely press it. It would very likely press it. If China could press a button and delete the US government and assume control of the United States, they would press that button. They would do it in a heartbeat, right? They wake up every single day. There are dozens of, probably tens of thousands of Chinese CCP staff who wake up every day and think, how can I destroy the United States of America? How can I crush them into irrelevance? How can I make them a vassal state of China? They wake up every single day and do it, right? There are Russians who wake up every single day and go, how do I turn America into fucking scrap? How do I make them Somalia? They wake up every day and think about it. And so when you have part of the US apparatus that does the same thing, you don't want to sit there and stop running that race. It's like tearing down a wall. It's like tearing down a fence. If you live with neighbors with vicious dogs that want to fucking tear you limb from limb, guys, you cannot tear down your fence and go, well, I'm going to build a new one. It's going to be better. Maybe it's going to be better, but you can't tear down your existing fence and then build it later. It's a zero fail environment. And that is why there's so much redundancy in government. You have to have a system with slack. You have to have redundancy. You cannot run it like a company. It is fundamentally different, right? Imagine if we only had the military that we needed. Remember, we have 1 million soldiers. We probably have, and probably, I'd say 900,000 of them are sitting on bases in the United States doing fuck all. They're fucking area beautification and practicing shooting at shooting ranges. That's it. Why? Why have 900,000 people? You don't use them. Why have them? It's because you don't want, because when you need them, you cannot simply conjure them up. You have to have excess resources in the system because you cannot fail. You cannot lose the war and then go, damn, now we'll bet the army to win it. No, dude, when you've lost the war, you've lost. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. Please understand, I'm not some turbo woke liberal nonsense. Okay, you've been on this channel long enough to know that's not me. I don't particularly have any affinity for certainly the previous administration, and certainly many of the insanity that constitutes the far left in the United States. But you should also understand that these problems are serious. This is not me fucking pontificating. These are real issues. They are going to really play into the enemies of the United States, enemies of freedom, enemies of democracy. Honestly, think about it, right? Why don't you move to China? Why don't Americans move to China and Russia by the thousands? Why doesn't that happen? It's because we are a free, prosperous country. And you should think about that before we start to burn the whole country to the fucking ground. Anyway, thank you guys. Thanks to Bill Collier, Robert Colbert, Gars, Martin, Eugene Crest, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karis, L90, Petra Tororu, all of our lieutenant tier members. Could not do it without you guys. And I will see all you guys in the next one. Cheers.